Imagine a world where education is free, healthcare is free. Even necessities like housing and electricity are provided. Sounds like a utopia, right? Well, for citizens of certain nations, this isn't a fantasy, it's reality. Countries like Libya under Gaddafi, the UAE, and Qatar have implemented policies that provide their citizens with a wide range of social benefits, sometimes even bordering on free services. This includes free education, healthcare, housing, and even utilities like water and electricity. Other nations like Norway, Finland, and Sweden also offer extensive social benefits, including generous parental leave, unemployment benefits, and pensions. This isn't about endorsing specific regimes or ideologies. It's about examining a crucial question: the role of a government in its citizens' lives. It's about understanding how some nations, despite their challenges, have managed to create a safety net that many can only dream of. And it's about highlighting the stark contrast with countries like Nigeria, rich in resources yet plagued by poverty, where the promise of prosperity remains tragically out of reach for many, and even a justifiable minimum wage is a distant dream. If you found this video insightful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more content like this. Under Muammar Gaddafi's rule, Libya, despite its authoritarian context, implemented a system that provided substantial benefits for its citizens. Free education, from primary school to university, was a cornerstone of Gaddafi's vision. Healthcare, too, was virtually free, with citizens having access to subsidized or completely free medical services. Gaddafi's government also implemented programs for affordable housing, recognizing it as a basic human right. While the regime's authoritarian nature casts a long shadow on these achievements, it's essential to acknowledge the tangible impact these policies had on ordinary Libyans. The literacy rate soared during Gaddafi's reign, and access to healthcare, once a luxury, became the norm. Libya's experience, though undeniably complex, offers a glimpse into a society where basic needs were met, albeit under an iron fist. It serves as a stark reminder that even in the most unlikely of places, the pursuit of social welfare can yield tangible results. The glittering skylines of the UAE and Qatar stand as testaments to their oil wealth. But these nations have gone beyond simply accumulating riches. They've implemented systems to distribute this wealth at least partially among their citizens. The UAE in particular has invested heavily in education, infrastructure, and social programs for its citizens. Free or heavily subsidized healthcare is a given, and education, often up to the tertiary level, is either free or heavily subsidized. Qatar, similarly, provides its citizens with free education and healthcare. The Qatari government also offers generous subsidies for housing, food, and utilities. These policies, while often criticized for favoring native citizens over the large migrant worker population, demonstrate a commitment to ensuring a certain standard of living for their people. Whether driven by genuine social concern or a desire to maintain stability, the UAE and Qatar demonstrate that resource wealth, when coupled with strategic investment in social programs, can create a remarkably high quality of life for citizens. Now let's shift our focus to Nigeria. A nation blessed with abundant oil reserves, it stands in stark contrast to the examples we've just explored. Despite its immense natural wealth, Nigeria grapples with endemic poverty, a struggling healthcare system, and an education sector in dire need of reform. So the question arises, how can a nation so rich in resources be home to so much hardship? The answer in a word is complex. However, one cannot ignore the elephant in the room: corruption. Decades of mismanagement, embezzlement, and outright looting of public funds have crippled Nigeria's potential. The stark reality is that while oil wealth flows into the coffers of the elite few, the vast majority of Nigerians remain mired in poverty, deprived of even the most basic necessities. This stark disconnect between resource wealth and citizen welfare exposes the deep-seated systemic issues plaguing Nigeria. Let's talk numbers, shall we? In the UAE, there is no set minimum wage, but the average income for Emirati citizens is significantly higher than that of migrant workers, thanks to government policies and employment preferences. In Qatar, the minimum wage, while recently implemented, still ensures a basic standard of living significantly higher than many developing nations. Now compare this to Nigeria. The current minimum wage hovers around 30,000 naira per month, roughly equivalent to 40 USD. Let that sink in. This paltry sum is expected to cover rent, food, healthcare, education, and all other living expenses. It's a scenario almost unimaginable for citizens of the UAE or Qatar. This stark disparity in minimum wage reflects a fundamental difference in the social contract between the government and its people. In the UAE and Qatar, citizens benefit from their nation's wealth. In Nigeria, citizens are left to fend for themselves, struggling to survive on a pittance while their nation bleeds wealth. Corruption in Nigeria is not just a problem, it's a national crisis. It's so deeply entrenched that Transparency International consistently ranks Nigeria among the most corrupt nations globally. From inflated contracts and ghost workers to outright embezzlement of public funds, corruption has become a national sport, played by those entrusted to serve the people. The consequences are devastating. Hospitals lack essential medicines. Schools crumble for lack of basic amenities. Roads remain death traps. Why? Because the money meant for these vital services has lined the pockets of corrupt officials. This systemic looting of public funds has robbed generations of Nigerians of their rightful inheritance, a brighter future. Some argue that Nigeria is a victim of the resource curse, the paradox where resource-rich nations often experience slower economic growth and worse development outcomes than countries with fewer natural resources. While this theory holds some weight, it's crucial to remember that resources themselves are not the problem. It's how they are managed, or rather, mismanaged. The UAE and Qatar, despite their oil wealth, have managed to avoid the worst of the resource curse by diversifying their economies and investing in their people. Nigeria, on the other hand, has become a cautionary tale of what happens when corruption and mismanagement reign supreme. The blame lies not with the oil itself, but with those who have failed to utilize this wealth for the betterment of all Nigerians. The stark contrast between Nigeria and nations like the UAE or Qatar boils down to one crucial factor: leadership. In the UAE and Qatar, despite their flaws, a certain level of accountability and transparency exists. Leaders, while not perfect, are held responsible for their actions, and the misuse of public funds is not tolerated lightly. In Nigeria, it's a different story. Accountability is often non-existent. Corrupt officials operate with impunity, their ill-gotten gains stashed away in offshore accounts while their people suffer. This lack of accountability has created a culture of impunity, where corruption thrives, and the very notion of good governance seems like a distant dream. It's easy to get lost in statistics and economic analyses, but we must never forget the human cost of this stark disparity. Behind every corruption scandal, every inflated contract, every misappropriated naira, there are real people whose lives are devastated. There's the mother who has to watch her child die because the local hospital lacks basic medicines. There's the young student whose dreams are shattered because he can't afford an education. There's the family forced to live in squalor because their government has failed to provide even the most basic necessities. These are not just statistics. They are real lives, full of potential, tragically cut short or forever altered by a system that has failed them. The situation in Nigeria is not just an African problem, it's a global one. As long as corruption and mismanagement continue to plague resource-rich nations, poverty will persist, instability will fester, and the cycle of suffering will continue. We can no longer afford to remain silent observers. The international community has a moral obligation to hold corrupt leaders accountable, and to support initiatives that promote transparency and good governance. This means demanding greater transparency from multinational corporations operating in resource-rich countries. It means supporting organizations working on the ground to empower citizens and advocate for their rights. And it means demanding that our own governments prioritize good governance and sustainable development when engaging with countries like Nigeria. Despite the bleak picture painted, there is hope for Nigeria. A new generation of Nigerians is rising, demanding better from their leaders. They are utilizing technology to hold those in power accountable and to amplify the voices of the marginalized. Civil society organizations are working tirelessly to promote transparency and to advocate for policies that benefit all Nigerians. The path forward is clear. Nigeria needs a complete overhaul of its governance structures. It needs leaders who prioritize the welfare of their people over personal gain. And it needs a citizenry empowered to hold their elected officials accountable. The journey will be long and arduous, but the potential for a brighter future, a Nigeria where its vast resources translate into tangible benefits for all its citizens, makes the fight worthwhile.